We've been studying a lot on the economic issues in the U.S. here lately and how it affects us, and really how it's tied to Scripture and ultimately to Revelation and Jesus' second coming. And it's kind of interesting when you see all this stuff unfold. And what Luke wanted to do was kind of start this media thing and practice, doing some online videos and mentoring, teaching sessions on subjects that we might have some sort of knowledge about. And so that's all this is. I'm a nerd. I admit that. I read a lot of books. I'm working on my third college degree just because I like to learn, and I have plans to go back and get a fourth and a fifth. But I have a lot of background in economics and finance specifically. I have a bachelor's degree in finance. I have a minor in economics. I would have got a bachelor's degree in economics, but you either got to go teach or be a stockbroker to use it. So I thought, well, why waste that? So instead I went to finance, which is a branch of economics. So if you talk to a finance guy, they typically understand the economy really well. And they're really nerdy, and they're uptight, and they're boring, and no one wants to talk to them. And I try not to be that guy. And so here's what I want to do. We'll pray here in just a second. But all this is very informal question and answers. If you've got questions, I'll do my best to answer them. I've had to counsel, my early to mid-20s. I was counseling soldiers as an officer on their personal finances, the finances in their marriage. When they go deploy, they come back with a big checkbook, and a lot of them can get themselves in trouble. You hand an 18-year-old out of high school, $20,000 cash from his, deployment save up, he can go out and make a mess. And so I was the finance officer for several units that I was in, 4 different platoons when I was an executive officer and when I was a company commander. And so I've given this talk quite a bit. And so to sit down with couples, that are 18, 19 years old, just got married right out of high school, and I'm 25, never been married, it was really difficult. And so I had to do a lot of research, read a lot of books, and eventually got a degree in finance just to help teach this stuff. So I don't know everything, but I have a pretty basic knowledge of the economy and finance. And so if you've got questions about crazy investment lingo, like the difference between stocks and bonds, credit default swaps, financial derivatives, these sorts of things, you hear kind of spooky sounding words when you talk about it, liquidity, all these crazy words in finance that seem really scary, or they're not scary. In fact, I used to watch CNN, the money guy, and all those ticker things go by, and he's smashing up stuff to go sell, 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 and I'm like intrigued by that stuff, and it kind of made me nervous because I didn't know what he was talking. He was like, buy, 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 But things like the difference between a bull market and a bear market, a lot of people don't really know what that means. I didn't know what that means, so it can be really intimidating. But here's the end result. The end result is you are, God willing, you don't get, God doesn't take you off this planet. You're going to retire someday, and if you leave your retirement in the hands of the United States government, you're not going to retire. You're going to work the rest of your life. I can say that, and I'm going to tell you why I believe that now. I've got a lot. I just pulled a lot of current data today. A lot of this I studied in class pretty in depth. I took an economics class just for fun, the U.S. 20th Century Economics course at Marshall, which is geared toward the master's program, and we studied the 20th century U.S. economy from actually 1880 all the way till about 1970, something like that. We spent 2 months specifically on the Great Depression and learning how that built up and how we came out of that. So what I want to do is take us back there and kind of show you where we've been, how we got to where we are, and where we stand now. And I think one of the things this does is kind of scare you into action. If you see how bad it is and how bad it could be and where we could go, it might kind of pull you into a little bit of action, especially you, Bobby, being really young. This is a class they should teach in high school. They don't. If you never get taught it, you kind of just fall into spending like an accident. You hit the workforce, you start working, and if you've never been taught how to manage your money, how to invest, and how to plan for the future, you're missing out on a great opportunity, number one. But number two, you could just completely crash your life, as I can tell you from experience, and a lot of friends I have from experience. But let's do this. Let's pray real quick. I'll pray over us, and then we'll get started. Lord, we praise you tonight. God, we thank you for this opportunity you've given us together. God, we thank you for your word and what it teaches. And God, that investing and savings and ways to handle debt, all these things are actually a part of Scripture. And God, you've given us some strict instruction on how to manage our finances, how to budget as a family, and how we are to prepare for the future. And God, I just pray right now that you would come into this place and help teach us, just open our minds, and kind of speak to us in a way that maybe we haven't heard before, in terms of directing our money a certain way and ruling it instead of it ruling us. It's in your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. Okay, so if any point anyone wants to start discussion, I'm all for that. I can hear myself talk all day, but I don't really like it, the way I sound. When I hear myself on the video or recording, it sounds horrible. So I prefer not to talk, but if you've got questions, interrupt. If you don't understand something, just interrupt. So I'll just kind of get the ball rolling. The economy today is a complete nightmare. It's a mess. And when I was in my economics courses in 2005, my professors were strictly saying, you guys are in trouble, you being your generation. A lot of things kind of indicate when a financial crisis is about to occur. There are a couple indicators. Number one, you will start seeing investors quietly leave the market. They will quietly begin to adjust their investments because if you know, when an economic crisis occurs, there's a lot of money to be made. If you remember in 2008, the credit default swap, what that is it's essentially an insurance policy betting on a company to fail. So if I took out an insurance company or contract on your company and I bet it went bankrupt, and it does, I'm a millionaire overnight. So that's what a credit default swap is. And if you remember in 2008, the news was just flooding about how evil this is to have these things out there available to investors. What happened was in 2006 and 2007, actually all the way back to 2003, everybody was saying the housing market is going to bust. It's absolutely going to pop. Question is when. So, late 2006, early 2007, investors started making these little purchases, and then in 2008, a lot of people got poor and a lot of people got rich. And so anytime you see investors start playing with their investments in a really kind of interesting, quiet way, they leave the market, that's a good indicator something's about to happen. I'll say this, something's about to happen. Everybody's saying 2014 maybe. No one, you can't really put a date on it, but something is about to happen. Here's some pretty interesting current trends. The first time in economic history, our national debt is now over $6 trillion. It's the highest it's ever been. Okay? You can even watch it live. Now, here's the thing about the national debt. We did the calculation on this thing. See how it's constantly moving? This is new debt added to the economy. And every 4 seconds, $250,000 of debt is added. So it's not just paying out payments. We are increasing our debt $250,000 every 4 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We just went $250,000 even more in debt. Every 4 seconds. All right. What's interesting about this number is that this year, the national debt surpassed the national GDP. The GDP is essentially income. So the national income right now is $15,423 billion. The national debt is $16 trillion. So if we're going to put this in your perspective, let's say you made $40,000 a year. Imagine having $60,000 of debt and then $5,000 of new debt every month. That's essentially what you're looking at. So if you make 40 but you owe 60, how do you get out of that? Especially if it takes 20 to survive alone, right? You're talking a long time. I mean, this is decades. And everywhere you go online, you can look up some really interesting accounting videos on the national accounting data. Everybody that I've read says it's impossible to fix at this point. We've just surpassed. Now, here's why. Let me give you a couple reasons why. Number one, let's talk Social Security. And everybody knows what Social Security is. It's essentially you're paying into your retirement. Well, you're actually paying for the generation ahead of you. So when you go to the workforce, a little bit of money comes out of your paycheck, goes in this little savings account, and it's supposed to build while you're in the workforce 40, 50, 60 years. And then when you retire at 62, you come out and you should have this little savings account built up, which is what the Social Security Act said. And originally, nothing was supposed to touch that little account. Well, our government, all its wisdom, needed to fund other programs, so it started borrowing money out of the Social Security account to pay for these programs, but never put it all completely back in. And so, in 2037, we will be completely drained of Social Security. That means, since right now we're all paying into it, by 2030, us paying into it won't do any good. 2037, excuse me. Now, here's the other thing. This year, or 2011, no, this year, the account finally hit zero. We are now borrowing to pay out Social Security payments. And here's the main reason why. In January 1st, 2011, the first baby boomer turned 65. Now, if you know anything about the baby boomer generation, after World War II, mom and dad came home, or dad came home to find the war, and little bunnies just started popping up everywhere. All right? So you had this giant population, which is actually the largest portion of the U.S. Population out there. It's massive. And they just started going into retirement in 2011. So now, not only is Social Security already bankrupt, but now the largest portion of the population is now going into Social Security trying to draw. I think it's 10,000 people a day for retirement, and trying to pull funds out of an account that is borrowing money to pay the ones that are already in retirement. Does everybody see where this is heading? So when my teachers are saying there's no Social Security for you when you retire, they weren't joking. There's no way. There's no way.
Where are they borrowing?
We'll get into national debt, but the way they borrow things, well, let's just talk about the national debt. Okay, so that's a good question. How they borrow. The national debt is actually chopped into several different pieces. So when people say, oh, we owe $6 trillion to China, that's absolutely not right. The way the economy works is we have what's called the Federal Reserve Bank. It's the central bank for the United States. Okay? The way it works is the Fed is completely separate from the United States Treasury. It makes its own decisions independent of the Treasury. It was set up that way so that politicians couldn't influence their decisions. Because then all of a sudden the president could go, oh, flood the market with money so we can expand it, which is not a healthy thing to do economically. So they wanted independence. So you've got the Treasury and you've got the Fed. The Fed instills what we call monetary policy. What it does is it adjusts interest rates. So if we want investment to expand, what do? You lower interest rates, the rate of borrowing. If you want to contract the economy, slow it down, you increase interest rates. And that's what the Fed does. It plays with that interest rates. It does it by borrowing money and then putting money into the economy. So everybody knows what supply and demand is. Okay, so if I had 5 T-shirts and everybody in here wanted these T-shirts, they were amazing. Well, there's more than 5 people here. What's the price of that T-shirt going to go? It's going to go way up. What if I had 20 T-shirts and everybody wanted one? It's going to go down because you've got a small demand for a high supply or vice versa. Everybody see how that works? Well, interest rates work the same way. When the Fed wants to increase interest rates, it's got to pull money out of the market. Money is the supply. So what it does is it purchases treasury bonds. I'm sorry, get backwards. If they want to pull money out of the money supply, they will sell treasury bonds. Okay, because if they send the U.S. government a treasury bill, the government gives them cash. So we just pull cash out of the economy. On the flip side, if we want to lower interest rates, we want to flood the market with cash, we will sell the treasury bill back to the treasury, right? So there's an exchange. I get the bill, the treasury gets the cash. So they keep moving cash in and out of the economy. That's what creates this expansion, contraction, high, low interest rates. Is that confusing? Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. So what happens is the treasury actually owes the Fed a lot of money because you're talking hundreds of billions of dollars in order to affect interest rates. You've got to pull in and out. Well, let me pull up my diagram. So, I wish we had this on the deal, but we don't. This is the national debt broken down into like a pie chart. All right. Does everybody see that 42.2%, the big blue right there? You know what this is all the national debt, all right? It's around $6 trillion. That 42% is the money we owe ourselves. Interesting, huh? So almost half of the debt we owe to ourselves. That's the Treasury and the Fed talking back and forth because they're holding cash from the Treasury Department in order to adjust interest rates. All right. So the other parts of this, where do you think China is? China is right here at 7.5%. It's a very, very small number when politics can make that number sound amazing. Oh, we owe this money to China. Well, it's only 7% of the national debt. Social Security Trust is 18%. That's the second one. So our Social Security system, we owe a lot of money. Military retirement, pensions, that's only 2%. So when I retire at 20 years, or anybody that's full-time, you get a pension. They pay out those pensions. It's almost like Social Security. But that's only 2% of the debt. So when you break the debt down, we actually owe more to ourselves than we owe to China. In fact, it's almost half the debt. So that's where the national debt stands. So it sounds controllable, but on the flip side, what happens is if you notice the first time in decades, our credit rating was lowered this year from a AAA to a AA status by Moody's. Right? Did anyone catch that in the news? That was a big deal. The markets tanked for a day because of that. Our credit rating, so you've got these entities that say, oh, Luke's good for a $10,000 credit card. You know, Rocky's good for a $100,000 credit card because his credit's better, right? So if you get better credit, you got a bigger credit card to have. Well, we've always had immaculate credit as an economy because we're the biggest in the world. Well, this year, these same people said, no, the U.S. is now kind of slippery. Their debt's so much, we're going to pull their credit rating down. So we're no longer eligible for the $100,000 credit card. We're only $50,000. Okay, so there's economic indicator number 2. Remember the first I told you is people pulling their money. Number 2, our credit rating was downgraded. All right.
For the national as a nation.
Yes. Yeah. Few things are about to happen, and this is like we're going to see it in the next 2 years. 2014 is a key year. Most economists will tell you that the Chinese GDP, their economy, is going to pass the United States economy in 2014. It's going to happen next year, the year after, or the year after. China will pass the United States in economic power in the next 2 to 3 years. That's like tomorrow. That's right around the corner. The United States has been the economic powerhouse since 1945. Because what did we do in 1945? We hammered the European nations to a pulp, and we're the only economy standing. And which brings me up the other point. Remembers the Great Depression in 1929? In 1929, the summer of 1929, some interesting things happened. You had guys pulling their money out of the stock market. They say never let it go to the peak. And so they started withdrawing all their funds. Guys like J.P. Morgan, Andrew Carnegie, these are really wealthy families. The Rockefellers, these guys pulled out of the markets, which also pushed it over to the edge. And so in 1929, we got the Great Depression and the economic collapse. Since then, through the 30s, it was just 10 years of just misery. We could not get out of debt. In fact, 1931 was worse than 29 in terms of bad economic policy. If you study the FDR administration, they did some silly things. Like they started doing this thing called government spending and started paying for all these programs. You can actually research this. They paid a study group several $100 million to find 100 ways to cook spinach. That was a government program in the 1930s. Right? The Hoover Dam, there's a big electrical grid in Tennessee, all these big government programs. Well, what it did, it really didn't do much good at all. We did not recover in the 30s. How did we recover? Because we went to war. We got this big, giant war engine started because we needed tanks and planes and all these other things to go fight in the European theater. And so the economy today is technically built off of the industrial military complex of the 1940s. Right? So we built this giant war-fighting machine in the United States. We built factories, we started making tanks, steel production, yada, yada, yada. And so when the war was over, our economy's booming, but we've got this giant military building economy, and that's what really pushed us into the greatest greatest nation that's ever been on the earth. We were never like that before the 40s. Now, after 1945, we became the economic powerhouse, and we have been until today, which now, like I said, China is about to pass us up. Now, why that's scary? A couple reasons. In 1945, oil was pegged to the pound, the British pound. Okay, and when we took over as the economic powerhouse, oil's pegged to the dollar now. So if you read how much oil costs, it's $80 a barrel, or $90 a barrel, or $110 a barrel, U.S. dollars per barrel. Now, if the Chinese economy starts passing us up, and there's a lot of places like North Korea, Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia would like to have the Japanese yen or the euro pegged to the price of oil. Well, let's say it's, I don't know, let's just pick the pound. Let's say the British pound is pegged to a drum of oil. Well, if you know anything about currency exchange, our dollar is worth about 20 cents of the pound, 30 cents of the pound. So if tomorrow price of oil gets pegged to a British pound, one drum of oil is not going to be $80. It's going to be like $180 or $210 a gallon. Now, think about the repercussions of that. All right, what uses oil? Well, everything from clothing, food, groceries, anything you buy at the store has to be shipped using oil. Well, if the price of oil goes up, what do you think the price of those commodities are going to be? They're going to skyrocket. I've heard predictions of $13 a gallon of milk. I've heard, you know, I don't know, a shirt, a $20 shirt now becoming a $60 shirt.
How can that happen just overnight? You repeat what I asked, like the question that I say, so people.
Okay, so how could that happen overnight? It wouldn't happen overnight. You would see the central banks of the world, because we've got the Federal Reserve, which is our central bank. Well, there's central banks everywhere, and they all talk. A lot of it has to do with the valuation of our currency and the other currencies. Because, right, you know, the dollar is worth more here than it is in other places. It's worth less in other places than it is here. It just depends on what the currency exchange is in that country. But there are a lot of places that would like to see a one world economy, one world global economy, one world bank, one world currency, which could absolutely be validated with Scripture, kind of pushing in that direction anyway. This is why the European Union, one of the biggest currency holders as far as nations involved with it. In fact, I think it is. I don't know any other currency that has that many countries tied to a single currency. So if you've got 60 countries all using this currency, and the U.S. is really the only one that uses the U.S. dollar, why wouldn't everybody want the euro to be pegged to, these other sorts of commodities? Everybody see how that works? So let's say that happens, that the currency, the price of oil is now pegged to a different currency. Man, that could be devastating to us. A couple interesting facts. In the year 1990, the average annual income in the United States was $39,000 a year. $39,000 in 1990. Today, in 2010, 20 years later, it's $43,000. So that's a $4,000 difference. That's a very slow increase compared to inflation rates, which should be 3% each year on average. So one thing you're seeing in the U.S. economy, another indicator number 3 or 4, wherever we are, is the separation of class. You're starting to see more wealthy people and more lower class poor incomes. The middle class is starting to get very, very skewed. Does that make sense? You're not seeing a simple separation of the three. If average incomes don't increase like they should, well, the wealthy get more wealthy and we kind of just stay where we are. There's this huge gap. Last time that happened was in 1928, just before the Great Depression. Around that time, you started seeing the separation of class, and then because of scarce income like that. So that's another indicator of an economic thing going on. And I'm not a doom and gloom guy. The thing is, I'm really not. In fact, it interests me to a point because I study all this for years and years, and now I finally get to see how it actually works, and where all the stuff my teachers told me is actually starting to unfold, that kind of thing. But I like scaring people into action. not with the Bible. I think that's a totally different subject. But with this, scaring you into action is a good thing, I think. Another thing that's supposed to happen in 2016, right around that time, we're supposed to move into what's called peak oil. Peak oil is, there's only so much oil in the ground, right? It's a natural resource that's scarce. It's going to run out. It will run out someday. Question is when. Well, we've been producing since, the early 1900s, 1902, something like that, where they found oil in Saudi Arabia. In fact, the whole Industrial Revolution is built off of fossil fuels. Without the dinosaurs dying and falling on the earth, we wouldn't have had the 20th century, all this production of welding and high-rise building and coal, oil, natural gas. This is all from dinosaur residue under the earth. Well, it's going to run out. But a lot of indicators are showing we will hit peak oil in 2016. So if this is oil production, peak oil is at the top. The only place for it to come is down. And so once you pass that threshold, that peak into our natural resources being depleted, what happens if the supply is limited but the demand's still up? Prices go through the roof. So there's a double whammy on oil. And I know oil shouldn't be a big deal, but it absolutely is a big deal. Our defense system does not operate without oil. Humvees, tanks, Bradleys, anything that moves on the ground, Paladins, all our air defense weapons in our defense department runs on diesel fuel. And that's why oil is actually a national security priority, because without it, we can't defend ourselves. And so, yeah, oil is absolutely essential. Oil is why you're sitting here safely today. It absolutely is. But it also helps us ship things back and forth across the country, across the ocean. Oil is a big deal. So it's a huge demand in the world. But once we pass that peak oil point and demand's still pretty high, yeah, you're talking huge increases in oil price. That's coming. The reason that's coming is because there is a limited supply and it's being depleted. So, we have no choice but to see oil prices eventually go up.
So you're saying we should grow our own cows and stuff?
I'm not saying that at all. And again, I'm in the doom and gloom mode right now, but we're absolutely going to move into the happy part, or the preparation part. I say all this because I do believe there's some biblical merit to it. And I'm also, yeah. Okay, well,
I understand.
Everybody. So I taught this to Bobby. You might have been in there when I was teaching Sunday school. The teenagers. I told them this. If you look at how the 20th century shaped where we are today, and everything in Scripture, this generation, for the first time in human history, only 10, 15 years ago, we just crossed into this threshold where all prophecy in the Bible can be fulfilled. Just happened. So our generation, Bobby, you and me, Luke, Carrie, we just crossed into that threshold for the first time in human history. The technology, all this advancement in society is at the point where we can absolutely finally see all prophecy fulfilled. That's never happened before. We just crossed into that. So are we in the last days? Absolutely. Everything can happen. Simple example, the 3 prophets that will be killed and be seen around the world. Could that have happened in 1985? No. No, the internet was just an idea back then. We were office sharing, but I couldn't Google a video in Japan back then. How about 1995? You remember the dial-up? Bobby, you have no idea what I'm talking about. Yeah. That was 95. So when did internet really spread to all these other countries and we become a global network? It just happened. Just happened. So we now live in a point in human history that has never been seen before, and that is the second coming of Jesus. So, and I'm not a real expert on Revelation. It's interesting, but I try not to spend a lot of time there. But you're talking, a global economy, global currencies. The UN was kind of the start of that. This whole bringing the one world order kind of thing. Everything's kind of pointing to that. That you've got Greece failing, which was just a nightmare. It was a part of the European Union, went into bankruptcy last year. That was a huge deal, and all these other European countries tried to bail them out, and they still couldn't. You know why? Because their debt was too high. Their debt passed their GDP. They passed that point where it was unrecoverable, and that's what bankruptcy is. It's simple math. If you can't afford to pay your debt payments, what's going to happen to your house? They're going to take it. That's what happened in Greece. And so this year, 2012, our national debt surpassed our GDP.
So what would we take from ourselves?
What do you mean? What is it?
Like we can't pay back the treasury.
That's the interesting thing. We can't do things like print more money. If you do, you could. I mean, there's things we could do, but the economy is very, very fragile in the things that you do. When you make an adjustment in the economy, it takes 4 years to see the effects of it. So if the Fed raises interest rates today, it takes about 4 years to see the effect of that. It's a big, giant engine. So to make a little adjustment here, you're talking years down the road before you actually see the effects. So trying to predict this, that's what fiscal policy and monetary policy does. It tries to predict, okay, where are we at 5, 10, 12, 20 years from now? What do we do now to make it work? Well, we don't know what's going to happen in the next 4, 5, 10 years. I mean, you could have national crisis. You could have World War III. You could have major droughts. All these things play an effect on an economy. And so you've got all these different adjustments you can do, but, that's why the whole presidential debates, if you've been paying attention to that, they said, well, you've had 4 years to do this. Well, it takes 4 years for whatever policy he enacted on day one to see it unfold today. And so, honestly, I don't want to get into politics, and I'm not going to tell you who I'm voting for or who to vote for. But honestly, the president does have, his office has a big deal, a big play on the economy. Government spending is a big one, and that actually contributes to the national debt. Any kind of policy making, like healthcare reform, that costs money. Where's the money coming from? Well, we broke down the healthcare plan in one of my finance classes to see how we would offset the cost. And you hear both sides, Republicans and Democrats. All this is going to work. All this is going to fail. All it's going to work. All it's going to fail. Well, when we finished the class breaking down the formula and looking where the money would come from, you know what was the final answer? We don't know. No one knows. It could work. It might not work. We won't know for 6 to 8 years if it works. So we're making fiscal policy today that we won't know if it works till 6 to 8 years from now. It might work. One of the things they did is they took away the middleman inside of student loans. So no longer does the federal government pay banks that pay students for student loans. They take the bank out of it and pay the student directly. So you lost a lot of interest in the bank exchange. That was one thing that they did to offset costs, which brought in several $100 billion just doing that alone. I won't get into all the details of it, but these policies absolutely affect where a country's heading. One thing, we know you got to have revenue to pay off debt, right? There's got to be income to pay off debt, and so one of the ideas is to increase taxes, especially on the wealthy. If you increase taxes on the wealthy, you generate more income, pay off the debt. Makes sense, right? Right? Okay, let me break it. If I'm a millionaire, I make $1 million a year, and I pay $100,000 in taxes. The government wants to raise my taxes, so I pay $200,000 a year. That's more income to the government. Does everybody see how that works? Pretty simple math. Problem is, Reaganomics, that doesn't work. Keynesian economics in the 1970s does not work, because when you start taxing the rich, what happens is they start moving their investments and their cash into non-taxable places. And so it creates a little weird effect, because rich people are happy paying the taxes they're paying now, but if you raise them, they're going to pull everything they were paying and moving them. So now the income you would have had is now gone.
Right.
And so traditional economics, Keynesian economics, says you don't do that. What they say you do is you lower taxes to increase job growth. And so when you increase job growth, you pull more people out of the population into working jobs, now paying taxes. So instead of 500,000 workers paying 30% taxes, we have 1 million people working now paying taxes. See how that works? Traditional economics says you increase jobs. Jobs is really how you do it. because consumer spending and small business make up a large portion of the economy. Small business is 70% of the economy, and so that's huge. So, doom and gloom. Everybody's scared now. All right. So here's the key. Let me read a couple scriptures. These are cool scriptures. They're encouraging scriptures because they're no. Everybody's about to perish now. It's not. The Bible is clear. In fact, Dave Ramsey talks. I don't know if you're Dave Ramsey fans, and we got spouse of one in the house. He uses a lot of these scriptures in his teaching. But if you read Proverbs, Proverbs is a great book. In fact, most of these are from Proverbs. He claims if you read it several times, you'll have a master's in finance, because Proverbs absolutely teaches us wisdom. And wisdom, it doesn't matter what happens in the economy. It doesn't matter, how bad things get. I believe if you apply the teachings that the Bible shows us, and you've got God on your side, you're going to be fine. You're absolutely going to be fine. And either way, we'll hear the trumpet sound and get a really cool show if it doesn't work out. Right? So, I throw the doom and gloom up front because I want people to realize that the average American needs to understand how serious a mess we are in, because it's an absolute mess. And I could talk predictions. I don't like those because they're opinions. But, a lot of people are... A little of both. The way economics works is we try to predict the future on historic events. All right? So if things that have never happened historically are now happening, that's a good indicator something major is about to happen. So when the housing market busts in 2008, when the economy hasn't recovered since 2000, all right, so in the year 2000, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was 14 points. Okay? It dropped in 2008. And has not come back. From 2000 to 2012 is the first time since the Great Depression we have not seen stocks outgrow bonds, which is a huge deal. Bonds on average have gotten 3, 4, 5, 6%. Stocks should be getting 12. They've been negative numbers. Equities have been negative numbers on an average the past 12 years. That's a big deal. That's really bad. And we'll talk stocks and bonds if you don't know what that is. But and we can get, if you've got questions on that, please ask me. But here's what Proverbs 6:6-8 says. Go to the ant, sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, who having no guide, overseer, or ruler provides her food in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. So diligence, planning for the future. Bible's full of wisdom like that. Don't worry about tomorrow. I get that. We're not going to worry about tomorrow. But we are going to plan for the future. You should diligently be planning your next move. You should have a 1-year goal, a 5-year goal, and a 10-year goal. I've got goals on each one of those levels. And Proverbs is clear that if you're lazy and sluggard, you're going to starve when it's time to harvest. Right? I mean, it's simple. If you don't store away now, you're not going to have anything later. Now, I don't think we need to get into this, but there is a such thing as hoarding and holding on too tight and trying to, have you ever seen that show Hoarders? Right? They got this 2,000 square foot house, but they're walking through it like this, trying to get through all the crap. Right? Well, Bible's also very clear on giving as a way of increasing. You cannot increase unless you're willing to give. It's absolutely scripture. And we can talk tithes. James 4:17 is one of my favorite verses because it says this. And I get haunted by scriptures because when I'm about to make a decision, these things come into mind, and I'm like, I can't do that. All right? James 4:17 says this. He who knows the good he ought to do and does not do it sins. Sins. So it's not enough for you not to do the bad, but you got to do the good that you know is good. All right, so when it comes to giving, that was Jesus' major message. Give to the least of these. So I don't think we got to get into that. You got to put that out there in case you're teaching somebody or telling somebody. You can't receive anything with a clenched fist. It's got to be open. Money's got to come in and out, and not just money, blessings in and out. And the Bible's clear. It says. I will pour out a blessing which you cannot contain. Well, a blessing is not necessarily financial. Blessing could be more. But anyway, so planning for the future, planning for the harvest, this is directly tied into investing, and we'll get into that. Proverbs 21:5, the thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenty, but the thoughts of everyone who is hasty only to poverty. So there's this whole idea of getting rich quick. You asked me about a triangle pyramid scam. We can do that. Guess what? It's not going to work. Ponzi schemes, they don't work. When you really break it down, the last guy to jump into it is the guy that always loses. So if you jump on board, you're hoping you're not the last guy because you're going to lose. And we could get in. If you got questions on how that works, the triangle thing, stay away from it. Don't do that. What the scriptures just said, if you're diligent and you're deliberate and you plan, in the long term you'll be wealthy. You're going to have plenty of harvest. If you're trying to get rich quick, it ain't going to happen. So playing the lottery doesn't work. Going to the dog track and trying to get rich does not work. And I'm not saying you can't do those things or anything like that. I'm saying people who play that stuff constantly to try to make money is going to lose. And there's a reason for that. And we'll talk about risk when we get into investing. But there's a reason why the stock market works, but going to the dog track doesn't. It's simple. But more to come on that. The prudent one foresees the evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. So again, there's no such thing as get rich quick. If anyone tells you, I've got this thing, walk away. It doesn't work. And we'll get into investing in this. But the Bible's clear. Plan for the future. Plan for your children. Plan for your family. Be responsible with that stuff. When it comes to retirement age, you want to live comfortably and happy. Enjoy your retirement. You don't want to work till the day you die. So let's talk investing, because that's essentially what this is about. Income is really only part of the equation. A lot of people think, well, if I only had more money, if I only made more money, I don't make enough money. All right. If a person who can't manage $40,000 a year well, he cannot manage $400,000 a year well. It's not going to matter the income. And I know everybody, well, give me a shot. No, it's true. It's absolutely true. Let me tell you a story. I redeployed from Iraq, and if the thing, when you deploy to a country, you get tax-free income. So every dollar I took in was tax-free. That's true. Yes. Didn't have to pay any taxes. Oh, and there's a really cool 10% free investment thing. Did you know about that for military? Oh, I got to get with you later. 10% tax-free on whatever you put in this account while you're deployed. So if you put $10,000 in, they just give you a $1,000 check just for having it there. Tax-free. All right. So when you deploy, the government tries to compensate your sacrifice, being away from your friends and family, for 6 months, a year, 15 months. It's hard. I'm a single guy, and it was hard. I couldn't imagine being married and having children. It would be absolutely difficult. So what the government does is, well, you don't have to pay taxes on this. And we're going to give you family separation pay, and we're going to give you hazard duty pay. I mean, it's a lot of money. So you've got this kid, all right, because most of the Army, without being disrespectful, but it's just true, a lot of kids can't get into college, don't want to go to college, but don't want to go work the workforce. So hey, I'll join the Army. And a lot of them come from bad homes. A lot of them, got their girlfriends pregnant in high school, and now they need income fast. So let's join the Army. And I'm telling you, this is the norm in the Army. I don't know about Air Force, but I'm just the Army. All right. And so me, as an officer, I get to manage all these little problems, because if the guy can't have his affairs in order at home, when I take him overseas to get in a firefight, what's he thinking about? Is he thinking about watching over here to make sure nobody jumps us, or is he thinking, I hope my wife's okay? She's pregnant, we have no money, and boom, shot, So it's very important that these guys' lives are taken care of before we leave, all right? So this kid comes home, 18 years old, true story. This is in 2008. He has 20 grand in cash that he saved up from his deployment, because he's not paying housing, he's not paying food, all that's covered. Every dollar he makes goes in the bank account. So 15 months, you can see how you can accumulate $20,000 in cash. That's a lot of money. This kid, 18, 19 years old, high school, never went to college, imagine giving an 18-year-old $20,000 and saying, Go have fun. Good luck. No financial education on it. Just go. Well, the Dodge Challenger, is that the big muscle car?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he really wanted one. So he went down with his 20 G's, cash, all the money he had, and he's like, I want that one because it's orange. And they said, oh, well, it's only $42,000. And he said, well, I've got 20. And like, oh, that's okay. What's your credit like? Well, it's horrible because the kid has no credit history. The government had to impose a law specifically for this reason. Before this law was implemented, creditors could charge any interest rate they wanted. 80%, 90%, 70%. I'm not even kidding. Like, seriously. So the government said, you know what? You're killing us. Our soldiers are being bankrupt, and they can't get security clearances because if you have bad credit, you can't get a security clearance. Well, they said, okay, the maximum is 30%, which is still ridiculous, 30% on a loan. So this kid goes, I want that car. Well, you're eligible for this 30% loan for $20,000. It's yours. He's like, oh, give it to me. I'm eligible. You didn't even think about it. So he's got his $20,000, dumps it into this thing, takes a $20,000 loan at 30% out on this car, okay? If you know anything, as soon as you drive it off the lot, guess what happens to the value? It drops down. As soon as you drop, well, here's the thing. He didn't know how to drive a Standard.
Oh.
And he bought a Standard.
Oh.
The next day, the kid has the thing towed in because he burned out the three gears in the car. And it gets worse. He goes, I want an automatic. Oh, that's all right. We'll just take your burnout car that's already lost value, that you're already in debt 30% of $20,000, and your cash is gone, by the way, and we'll trade it for this automatic, which is another $4,000 higher. All right, so he trades the car that day for a newer car, for a new car that's an automatic. He was, I hope I get this number right. For that car, he owed $38,000, 30%, plus he was $20,000 in. So he had $58,000 into this car that was only worth $43,000 the day it left the lot. Now, can you understand my frustration and how I have to sit this guy down and teach him how to get out of that mess? How do you get out of that? He couldn't sell. He could sell the car the day he bought it and still owe what? $20,000 for something he doesn't owe. Did that in 2 days. 2 days, and my commander just went, Joe, go talk to him. So, is finance important? Absolutely. It takes wisdom. It takes education. It really does. And I know because we're seasoned people. We've been in the workforce for years. We've got it all together. We know what we're doing. Just give me the money. I'll figure it out. Well, this kid tried to. Now, I know nobody is going to do that. And I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence or your knowledge of things. But all right, just as simple as him having the knowledge to steer clear of that 30% loan and the new car thing, there are things you should steer clear of in investing in retirement. And there's things you should go into that maybe you didn't know about as far as investing in retirement. I could give you so many stories of that. Soldier just got married. He had his 20 G's in the bank. He came home. His wife divorced him. He looked at his account, and it said zero. She had spent all the money, cheated on him, divorced him as soon as he got home, and the kid was broke. So he spent 15 months in a combat theater, thought he was coming home to a loving wife and 20 grand in the bank. Both are gone. Now, suicide is rampant in the military. And so instantly we've got the kid on suicide watch. And that's not just one. I mean, several. That story happens all the time. All right, so I have to sit down with this guy. Well, let's talk. Had another soldier couldn't pay his cell phone bill, and threatening to shut it off, and so he wanted to apply for an emergency relief fund, which is a loan that the Army offers to soldiers in trouble. It's like $8,000 max at a very low interest rates to help them get on their feet. And I sat him down in my office. I'm like, all right, talk to me. Well, I got this cell phone bill. What are the bills? I got this credit card. Okay, what else? That's it. That's it? Well, where's your $1,500 a month going? Well, there's this credit card too, and this credit card, and this outstanding student loan, and this bank, blah, 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 blah. Just keeps addition to mine. You start peeling back the onion, It's like, okay, now I know why your $1,500 can't pay for $2,000 worth of bills every month. All right? So he owed $2,000 a month in expenses, but only made $1,500 in money. Where's he heading? How do you get out of that? I mean, it's insane. But these kids just wander into this with no education, and they learn the hard way, and they come out in their 30s barely making it, let alone thinking for retirement. Are you kidding? They're just trying to stay above water. So there are smart things you can do. I'm going to talk a story about my brother. I know this is being broadcast. I don't think he'll mind. My older brother was the older brother, so he got hit hardest at home. And so, all the rules came down on him, the disciplining. Mom and dad kind of experimented with him. Well, he's the first one to move out. Are you the oldest? You're the oldest. You know what I'm talking about. I'm the middle, so I get to watch and go, don't do that, do that. Watch him pay, and I learned from it. Well, my brother moved out, met a girl, got into some major financial trouble. Was trying to become an officer. He's now a major in the Army. But you can't have financial trouble and be an officer. Your security clearance won't go through, and you'll be booted. And so he barely skated into this. I mean, credit cards. He did a lot of things just to get by. But there were nights he's told me, he's like, Joe, I could either pay the rent or I could have eaten. Those are my choices. And he got himself in a big mess. And for years, while he's in the Army, as an officer, you make pretty good money, but he still couldn't get above water. Well, he's my big brother, and it's hard for me to explain things like this to my family, but he's like, I know you do finance, show me some stuff. I'm like, okay. So I sat down, gave him basically the same talk. Hey, this is where we're heading. You need to prepare yourself. Get out of debt, debt-free, completely debt-free. Start parking your money into some investments, slowly building your nest egg. I talked to him on the phone a couple days ago. He's debt-free, and he's 33. He's 2 years older than I am. He's 33. He has $130,000 in his retirement fund already saved up at age 33. And he just started like 6-7 years ago. All right? He went from almost bankrupt, almost didn't get a security clearance, thousands and thousands of dollars of credit card in debt, jewelry, clothes, you name it, barely swimming. And then we sat down and chatted, and now he's on his way to becoming a millionaire in his 40s. In his 40s, late 40s, he will hit that $1 million mark because he's doing exactly what I taught him. It's no magic. Everyone in this room, doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your starting point, have the potential to gain a nest egg and retire comfortably when it's time to go. I plan to retire in my early 50s. I don't want to wait till my 60s. I'm not waiting for Social Security because it's not going to be there anyway, so I got nothing to look for in my 60s. So I started investing 24 years old, so 7-8 years I've been investing for that while. I got a degree in it because I kind of wanted to learn myself how this works. But there's a phenomenon in finance. How many wonders of the world are there? Seven? Okay, there's an eighth wonder of the world that everybody talks about. The economists, the finance guys, the insurance salesmen. The eighth wonder of the world is this: compound interest. Compound interest is phenomenal. It's a big deal, and no one thinks about it. And everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy, but it absolutely is. All right, so how compound interest works. Compound interest, if put into a tax-free investment, grows without anything coming out of it. Okay, so when I say tax-free, that means the interest it makes on it, the dividends it makes on it, all the money you park into it, never gets taxed. It's protected. Everybody's heard of a Roth IRA, traditional IRAs? A Roth IRA comes from, okay, so the traditional IRA was the first one to come out. What happens is you take pre-tax dollars out of your paycheck, right? So before it's taxed, it goes into this account. Right. And it just builds and builds and builds. But when you retire at 65, you start withdrawing and you pay taxes on it as you withdraw. Now, that seems kind of stupid because who knows what the tax rate will be then, and what about inflation? So you're taking money out, but you're losing it while you're taking it out at 65. The IRA, the Roth IRA, works like this. You take post-tax dollars out of your paycheck. So after it's been taxed, you take cash out of your paycheck, park it in the Roth IRA. It's tax shielded forever. So when you take it out at 65, no taxes on it. It's your money. It's beautiful. So I get this tax-free investment that can gain interest, compound interest, and I can keep putting money into it, and it never gets taxed. Okay, so taxes make up 30% of your income, 35% depending on your bracket. That's huge. So if I have $100,000 and I'm going to pay Uncle Sam, I'm going to end up with 70 when it's over. Which would you rather have, 70 or 100? You'd rather have 100. So keeping things tax-free is a good idea. The Roth IRA is brilliant for that. Bobby, you should absolutely get a Roth IRA when you start hitting the workforce and you get out of college. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me tell you why. Compound interest works like this. If I have $10,000 and I can gain 10% on that $10,000, what is that? $1,000. 10%, 10,000 is 1,000. Okay? So year one, 10,000 in this tax-free investment, I gain 1,000 in interest because it's 10%. Did we see how that works? Simple math. Year two, now how much money do I have in the account? $11,000. I get 10%, not on 10,000, but 10% on what? 11,000. So what's 10% of 11,000? $1,100. So now I have how much in the account? 10, 11, 12, 20, right? See how that's working? I get interest on the interest for the year before. That's compound interest. Did everybody see how that works? Okay, so you do this. You look confused. If you got any questions, you track what I'm saying? Okay, so if I had, you're building interest on interest. You're getting interest for the interest you earned the year before. So, you do this for 1, 2, 3 years. It moves a little bit. But let's say you do this for 10, 20, 30 years. So I did the numbers, and this is simple math. I did myself, actually. This gets me excited because it's amazing. All right, so let me tell you my little synopsis here. I'm 31 years old. Let's say I have nothing invested today, and I want to start investing today. All right? I want to retire at age 60, so that's 29 years. Okay? So I'm 31. I want to retire at 60. That's a good year to retire, 60 years old. Most people don't get that. So if I park just the minimum, $416 a month, which is, your Roth IRA, you can max at $5,000 a year right now. If I park $416 a month into that Roth IRA, when I hit 60 years old and making 12%, how much do you think that's going to be worth? I will have $1.2 million, $4,733. I'll be a millionaire if I start today. At just the minimum, I'll be a millionaire today. Why? Because it grows. You're getting interest on interest on interest. That $400 a month may not seem like much, parking for the investment. But when you do that every month for 29 years, it explodes. So let me show you the diagram so you can see. I'm going to walk away from the camera, but nobody panic. Okay. You see the pink line on the bottom, the blue line on the top? These are years. I know that's really difficult to see. These. Yeah. Okay. So these are years at the bottom. There's 20 or 42 years. Okay. The blue line is my total return. The pink line is the investment. So if you watch the first 10 to 20 years, they stay pretty close together, and then what? It just explodes, and your return goes through the roof. The reason is because you're going to hit a day where you hit $100,000. When you start compounding, 12, 10% on top of $100,000, and you do that for several years, it shoots through the roof. So the magic number is the $100,000 mark. When you make the $100,000 mark, you're talking no time. You're going to see $1 million because you get 10% on top of 100,000. What is that? It's 10,000. You make $10,000 in interest alone that year, right?
Where's that money come from?
What?
The interest. Where's all that come from?
Investments, and I'll talk about that. Yeah. So if I get 10% on 100,000, I have $110,000 in 1 year. I gained $10,000 in 1 year on just interest. That's not even my investment. So year two, what's 10% on 110,000?
Yeah.
100 or 25,000, right? 25, 10% on 10. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. So I'm getting interest on top of that $10,000 the next year, and then another $10,000 the next year, and then another $10,000 next year. And so when you pass the $100,000 mark, your investment just skyrockets. So that's why, in finance, we always talk about that mark. Dave Ramsey talks about one of his things. You pass that mark, you just see the thing explode. I mean, you're talking just a matter of a few years. You're a millionaire. An average guy, a millionaire. Now, did we do this overnight? Did we do this playing the stock market overnight? Did we do this on the dog track? No. It's long-term, diligent planning and investing. That's what it is. So everybody in this room, regardless of your age, have the ability to get that kind of wealth built for you and your family by the time you retire. It's absolutely possible. Now check this out. Let's say I meet future Mrs. Pauley. All right? She's out there somewhere. I'll find her eventually. Let's say she's 28 years old. Well, I can not only do a Roth IRA on myself, I can also do one on my spouse. So if the both of us are parking this minimum $400 a month investment into our Roth IRAs, guess how much we collectively have when we go to retire? Yeah. $2.9 million. So $3 million for me and my spouse.
Where were you like 4 or 5 years ago?
Well, this is just me. Now let's talk Bobby. Bobby, how old are you? 16. Okay, let's pretend that you got a job today and you could actually max out your Roth IRA starting today. All right? How old would you want to retire at? Well, let's just say 60. We'll say 60. If you do the minimum investment, this is the only investment. You can do multiple. This is one. This is your Roth IRA alone, which you should do. If you invest the minimum $416 a month starting today, when you're 60 years old, you'll have $7 million. I know, you guys think I'm crazy. It's compound interest because guess what? She's got more time, right? I'm 31. She's half my age. Well, 15 years of compounding, would just make her investment go through the roof. Now, let's go back to me.
What's the maximum?
The Roth is $5,000 a year, so $416 a month will max your Roth. But there are other investments out there. Let's say, and here's the rule of thumb: if you want to be wealthy, if you want to retire comfortably, 10% of your annual income should be invested in retirement. If you want to be wealthy, 15%. If you want to be super rich, 20% of your income. That sounds like a lot, 20% of your income, and it is. But some people, like single people, like you are, that's doable. If you don't have children and a family, start early. If kids get out of college. Huh?
I was going to say $460 a month.
Well, it's a start.
Right.
And we'll talk about how to do that. But here's the thing.
Now, I ask a question. What about if some of us only have half the time? How can we get the same results?
Okay, so how old are you?
Has double the time to invest.
Okay, well, there's 3 factors that go into investment: time, interest, payment. So if you're low on time, you need to boost the interest to boost the payment, right? There's the only 3. That's the only 3 things. So when people want to talk to you about like scam things, there's no way to miss that formula. You've got to have time, interest, and payment. There's the only 3 things that go in that formula. How old are you, Rocky?
45.
Rocky's 45. Let's say you want to retire at 65. That gives you 20 years to invest. If you start investing today, at the minimum, at 65, you'll have $500,000 in your nest egg. Let's say you because you're a single guy and you can work and you've got no family to support yet, like me, you can probably give a little bit more than that. Well, we're going to increase the payment now because we can't increase the time, right? Or you can increase the interest. This is the bare minimum 12. I'll tell you, I've gotten 22% on my return before. There are people out there who get 23, 24%. At the minimum, you want 12. But let's say we can get you 15. We got you 15%, and we increase your payment to say, the minimum plus half of that, so $600.
I think that's the hardest part right there.
What's that?
Is coming up with.
We'll talk about how to do that. I know that sounds difficult.
$600.
Well, we'll talk about that. But if you did that, you'd have $1 million by the time you're 60 at 15%. If you're like me and you can get 23%,
How do you get the higher interest rate?
you'll have 2.3.
I kind of retire like $1 million.
All right, the way you get higher interest rates.
Joe Pauley?
No, no, no. And here's the thing: never, ever, ever invest your money into something that you don't understand, ever. So some guy says, "Hey, I'm going to park this over in here. I'm going to get, it gets a pretty good return." Never do it until you completely understand what you're putting your money into. That's anything: cars, houses, investments. Doesn't matter. Never put your cash in something you can't explain to a 3-year-old. Okay? Because you could get yourself in a lot of trouble. Gold, commodities, beans, wheat. Stay away from all that. Anything with commodities. And here's why. Simple rule of thumb: commodities, you're betting on the weather. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're betting on the weather. If the weather's good and the harvest is good, you're going to come out on top. If the weather's bad, you're going to get sunk. So those are silly. Stay away from that. Things that I invest in. Large cap stocks, small cap stocks, international stocks, and some bonds. Typically, bonds are safer than stocks. Let's talk about stocks and bonds so everybody's on the same page. Everybody understand what the difference is between a stock and a bond? Maybe not. All right, spare your embarrassment. Here's how it works. Let's say I want to start this company, and I need money to start it. I want to make hats. All right, no, we'll go to the t-shirt business. I want to make t-shirts. I need, say, $500,000 to start this t-shirt factory. I know it's going to work. I make good t-shirts. I just don't have the capital to start this thing. Well, I can go to you and you and you and you and you and you and say, hey, I'm going to make this company, but I need to borrow a little bit of money. And guess what? I'll give you a piece of the company. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of us. We'll divide the company into 7 equal parts, and each one of you will own a piece of that company. And so if you each give me $10,000, we'll make this thing work, right? So now everybody has a $10,000 vested interest in the company. Well, I'm going to give you a stock for that. So there's 7 stocks here now. But we all own this company, 7 equal parts to this company. See what that is? So a stock is ownership in a company. You actually own a piece of a company. I own a piece of Apple. It's a very little piece, but I own a piece of Apple. Woo! All right? It means nothing. I have no voting rights, but I do own stock in Apple, a little bit of stock in Apple. So stock is ownership. A bond is a debt instrument. Let's talk about debt. Debt was never, ever, ever intended to be used as a way to purchase goods. Ever. Was not meant for that. You weren't meant to borrow money to buy a car. It wasn't set up to borrow money to buy clothes or a stereo. That's insane if you think about it financially. Why would you borrow money for something that isn't going to make you money? The debt instrument was created in order to make money. It's like an investment sort of thing. That's what debt instruments were for. So if I wanted to build a plant, our t-shirt factory was doing really good here in Charleston, and we wanted to build a plant over in California, well, we need $10 million to do that. Nobody here has $10 million. Well, we could borrow it from the bank, but they're going to charge us some outrageous interest on it, right? Or we can sell these bonds. What a bond is it says, hey, give me $1 million, I'll give you this bond, and I'm going to pay you a little bit of interest while we're building this plant over the next 10 years. So you get this little certificate that actually says bond, right? And every quarter we're going to pay you interest on that bond. So if it's a 3% bond, you're going to get 3%. And at the end of that production, that 10 years, and we finally got the plant built, I give you your $1 million back. So you parked it into that bond. I paid you a payment for that bond while I'm building my little factory, and then I give you $1 million back in bonds. See how that works? So a bond is a debt. I owe her money. She gives me money. I now owe. It's a debt. She doesn't have any ownership. She doesn't have any voting rights. She is a collector to me. Okay? So that's the difference between stocks and bonds. Stocks have historically done a little bit better than bonds. And here's why. The United States, our economy is resilient. We have some of the biggest companies in the world. Apple just hit the most valuable company in the world. It's worth several $100 billion by itself, and it's an American company. Target, well, I don't know if Target's American. Walmart's American, Sam's is American, Kroger's American, Home Depot's American, Lowe's is American. These are American companies, huge companies. They're massive, and they're international. They're everywhere. Well, Walmart, for example, goes overseas. They build Walmarts over there. Well, what happens when we build another store? What happens to the value of our company? Yeah, it goes up. If we got $1 million building here and we got $1 million building in Japan, we're now worth $2 million. So when companies expand, the value goes up. So if we started building our T-shirt factories all over the world and they're each worth $1 million, we've got 10 of them, guess how much we're worth? $10 million, at least, in assets. Because the building's it's a physical asset. It's worth money. The equipment in there is worth money. So now your share, your little 10 grand that you put in, is now worth $1 million. So the value of your stock went through the roof because of our growth. We grew. That's why I invest in stocks. Let me give you a little history here. The stock market has outperformed equities for quite some time. Yeah, here we go. Man, I wish you guys could see this. I'm just kidding. Okay, so you've got several categories of investments. You've got small company stocks. So when we talk small company, think anything under, say, 3,000 employees. No, I think it's 1,000 employees is a small company. Anything over 3,000 is a large company. Apple is obviously a big company. It employs a lot of people. You've also got long-term government bonds, so these treasury bonds that the Treasury and the Federal Reserve borrow, right? You can actually purchase those. And the thing is, the federal government has never defaulted on a bond, ever. And so that thing is worth whatever they tell you it's worth. So if something can default, it has more risk, right? Does everybody understand how risk works? Okay, if I have a bond, and you ever heard of junk bonds? You ever heard of a junk bond? A junk bond is a very risky bond. It's from a company that no one's ever heard of. They've got this great plan that's probably not going to work, and they want to sell you a bond to build it. That's a risky investment because, I mean, they're nobody. But now if Apple wants to sell me a bond, how likely are they to default on a bond? Not very. They're the largest valued company in the world. The United States is the same way. Our treasury bonds have never defaulted. So we've never said, I don't have the money to pay you, I'm sorry. The government's never done that. They've always had the cash to do it. Always, 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 always. So treasury bonds are always a safe investment. And in fact, most things are geared off of treasury bonds as an indicator. They have averaged, I want to say 4%, 3%, something like that on average, which isn't much. So treasury bonds are not a good investment in terms of return. The way risk and return works, simple rule. The higher the risk, the greater the return. The lower the risk, the lower the return. So let's say you got $10. You park that under your mattress. How safe is it? I mean, seriously, is it, I mean, pretty safe. How much return are you getting on it? Nothing. Nothing. Okay. Let's say you take your $10 and you park it into a savings account. How safe is it? It's pretty safe. It's not going to... Okay. Yeah. So the FDIC insures your savings account, right? Up to $250,000. So how safe is your $10 in a savings account? It's pretty safe. What's your return? Yeah, 0.0002%, maybe, right? So savings account has low risk, low return. Your mattress has no risk, no return. See how that's working? Now, let's say I put it into a stock, a single stock. Maybe that's not a good example. CDs. Everybody know what a CD is? Cash deposit? Certificate of deposit. Certificate of deposit is basically the bank taking your money and then investing it in something like paying out loans or whatever, and then you gain a little bit of interest on it. They're horrible investments, but they're a little more risky. Now, instead of the 0.0002% return that you'd get on your savings account, Now they'll offer you, say, for a 5-year CD, they'll offer you 1.5%. So you get a little bit better return, but it's a little bit more risky. Okay, so the mattress was no risk, but no return. Savings account was a little bit of risk, very little return. A CD is a little bit more risk and a little bit more return. Does everybody see how that ratio works? Risk to return. The greater the risk, the higher the return. If I take my life savings, let's say I take $10,000, I go up to the dog track, I put it on red on the Russian roulette wheel. How risky is that? That's extremely risky, isn't it? What if I hit it? 10 grand on 50-50 odds? Woo! What, $60,000? I don't know. I haven't played in a while, but if I put it on red, it's a very risky spot, isn't it? It's very risky because it can either go red or black. There's only 2 options. I've got a 50-50 shot, but what's my return? Huge. 50-50 odds, I'm just guessing. I'm betting I make at least 3 times on my money, 30,000 at least, something like that. So I've got a high risk, you got a really high return on it, right? So risk to return, risk to return. Always think high risk, high return. So when we say 12%, 12% is pretty good return, but there's going to be risk involved. The 12% is the data that I have in my nerdy notes here from my textbook. Since 1925, small stocks have averaged 11.9%. Small business stocks as a whole, not single stocks, all right, but the entire market of stocks have averaged 12% as a whole, all right, since 1929, all right. It's pretty good collectively, not single stocks. All right, big word. Don't freak out. It's called diversification. Has everybody ever heard that word diversification? Diversifying? No? All right. This is all that is. Diversifying is chopping up your investment and parking it in a bunch of different baskets instead of putting it in one. You never put your eggs in one basket, right? Because what can happen to the basket? You get smashed. But if you've got one egg in a bunch of different baskets, well, you're okay because it's spread out, right? That's diversification. You want to spread it out, and it's less risk. So if I park my money into one single stock, well, that stock could go up and down and up and down and up and down, right? I mean, they change every second depending on the demand of the stock, the value of it, the news. People could sneeze and think it'd fall. Who knows, right? What if I park my money into, say, 10,000 stocks? So I've got $1,000 or $10,000, and there's 10,000 stocks, and I put $1 in each stock. I've just diversified. I've taken what would have been 10,001 stock, and I've chopped it up and put it into 10,000 different stocks. Does that see how that works? So $1 in each stock, 10,000 stock. Well, we know as a whole, these stocks have made 12%. So I've diversified my risk from this woo to the whole thing moving up at 12%. That's diversification. Here's how it works. Let's say the umbrella sunscreen example. This is classic in finance. All right. So we want to invest in a company, and we're either going to invest, we're going to sell sunscreen, or we're going to sell umbrellas. What should we do? Anybody? Well, what if we can only pick one? Which one would you pick? What if it's a sunny year? All right, so see what we're saying? Okay, so if we invest everything into umbrellas, and we sell umbrellas only, and we have nothing but sunshine the whole year, how is our business going to do? It's not going to do very well. We got all these umbrellas laying around, and it's sunny out. Now, I'm not talking shade. I'm talking rain umbrellas, okay? Right?
Oh, right.
Okay, let's say we decided to sell sunscreen, right? So we've got all the sunscreen, and it turns out to be the rainiest year ever, monsoon weather. Well, how are we going to do? Terrible. We got all the sunscreen, no one's buying it. What if we had both? What if we had sunscreen and umbrellas? How are we going to do if it's sunny? We're going to do all right. We got sunscreen and stuff. What if we're going to do if it's raining? We're going to do all right. We got umbrellas. That's diversification. We didn't put everything in the sunscreen or everything in the umbrellas. We did a little of both. So together, collectively, they perform well. That's how stock diversification works. Is anyone lost at this point? You good? Okay. You good? All right. So that's diversification. You never, ever, ever want to park your investment into a single investment. It should be spread out, way spread out. Everybody ever heard of a mutual fund? Okay, a mutual fund is a mutually funded investment. That's why it's called a mutual fund. So let's say you're each business owners, all right? And you each have stock, all right? Different business. You sell apples, you sell grapes, you sell cantaloupe, you sell T-shirts, you sell sneakers, and you sell sunscreen. We'll go back to sunscreen, okay? So we got all these different companies in different industries. They're not all in the same industry. They're all different types, all right? So if it's sunny, you're going to do well, right? If people need shirts, you're going to do really well. If people like cantaloupe, you're doing awesome, right? Well, maybe they don't like grapes or oranges. That's all right. These guys are doing well. Well, what we do is we pull a fund. We create a fund by buying stock in each one of your companies. And we've got a mutually funded company. We have a little bit of sunscreen. We have a little bit of oranges. We have cantaloupes. We have T-shirts. What did I say you had? A T-shirt? Socks? T-shirt? Hats? You see what I'm saying? We've got companies, all different types of companies in this mutual fund, all these stocks. That's what a mutual fund is. It's a mutually funded investment. It's usually managed by a bank manager. He goes out and he buys and sells these stocks into this fund, and we're talking thousands and thousands of stocks that he'll buy and sell, or bonds, and put into this fund. That's called a mutual fund. Now, I only buy mutual funds, and here's why. Because as we've seen, the stock market as a whole performs very well. Because as a whole, it seems to move up at 12%. Single stocks go up and down, up and down, and up and down. That's why they're so risky. Well, you don't want that kind of volatility in your investment. You want it to grow slowly, slowly. All right. So I park my money in mutual funds because they tend to average right around 12, 14, 15%. The one that I hit a couple of years ago with my bank, USAA, was a precious metals fund. It grew to like 32% in 2009. It did really well, 32%. So can you imagine compound interest at 32%? Your investment's going to be huge. So your interest return is absolutely important. It really is. But there are different types of mutual funds. There's growth and there's value. Here's the difference. Everybody know what a dividend is? You ever heard of a dividend? Okay, a dividend, let's say I own a company, I have stock, it did really well, and you guys each own a piece of the company, right? We chopped it up and you own that. Well, the company made money. We did really well. We've got all this cash built up over the end. Well, to reward my investors, I'm going to pay you a little bit of the income. All right, so I'll give you, $500 on your stock, $500 on each one of your stocks. That's a dividend. It's money we've decided to pay out because the company did well, depending on how much stock you have. So if you have two shares of stock, and I'm giving $500 of stock, which is really high, but for this example, you would get $1,000 for your 2 shares. All right. Let's say you had 4 shares and you're getting $500 a share. Well, that's $2,000 that you'll get in dividends. Everybody see how that works? So a dividend is the income made throughout the year, which we hope to make money for a company, right? And we're rewarding our stockholders for helping us invest in this company. On top of that, the value should go up. Here's what the difference is between growth and value funds. If you had your money parked in an investment and you got a dividend, you could either A, take it out and spend it, or B, reinvest it back into it, right? Okay? So what companies do, sometimes they don't pay dividends. Sometimes instead of paying out the dividend, they take it and they invest it into more plants. Well, what happens when we build more plants? Your stock value goes up, all right? So that's what we call growth, because the company's growing. Instead of paying you a dividend, we're reinvesting the dividend into growth, growing the company. So now the value of your stock is going up. That's how stock growth is. That's called a growth fund or growth stock. So when you think growth, they're reinvesting the dividend to expand the company. The value is just the opposite. We actually pay out the dividend, you keep it. That's the only difference. So the company doesn't really grow in value in terms of investment. Does everybody see the difference between that? Dave Ramsey recommends, and I strongly recommend, good growth mutual funds, large growth mutual funds. because you're getting that growth, that value growth. So when you retire, because you've got 30, 20 years for this thing to grow slowly, because companies grow slowly. Well, if I invested in Walmart 20 years ago, how's the value of my stock going? If I invested in Apple 10 years ago, how's the value of my stock going? Man, it's shot through the roof the last 10 years, right? Because the company grows. So if I own a little bit of that, and that thing is growing, guess what's happening to my investment? It's growing. This is how this works, and it's not an overnight process. We're talking years. Because companies, Apple didn't say, all right, build a plant, boom. Build an iPad, boom. No, it takes time. It takes a long time. But over your life while you're working, this little investment thing is growing until you get this little formula. So, any questions? I don't want to go too much longer because you guys are getting a glazed look out. Is everybody clear what we're doing? Any questions on stocks, bonds, the market? Does everybody know what the difference between a bull and a bear market is?
No.
You ever heard of a bull market and a bear market? Okay. It's really stupid because it's a bull market. Well, okay. Well, here's why they call it that.
B-U-L-L.
Yeah, like the horns, rah, and the bear, rah.
There's like this big bull outside of Wall Street or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Where that's at. It's in New York.
It's outside Wall Street. Does anybody know what the difference is between a bull market and a bear market, what they even mean? Oh my gosh, I didn't either. And I asked my teacher, and I felt stupid because I thought I should know it. Nobody knows the answer to that. Well, here's the answer. So now you've learned something. A bull market is when the market goes up. A bear market is when the market drops. So the market's doing really good. It's a bull market. If it's coming down, it's a bear market. And you know why they call it that? Because a bull's horns go up, and a bear swats you going down.
Wow.
Isn't that the silliest? It's the truth. Yes, sir.
Question. When do you suggest if you invest in the stock market, you suggest when it's down, buy when it's down, or when it's up?
Well, the rule of thumb, you always want to buy down. Always. I mean, that's why I said people get rich during economic crisis, because guess what happens to stock value? It drops. So if you've got a lot of cash on hand, you're just waiting. 2008, it drops. Go buy. Go buy. Buy. You want to buy when it's cheap and sell when it's hot, right? That's the rule of thumb. For our purposes of long-term investing in retirement, you want a park and ride system. You're not waiting for the market to adjust. You buy every month. You invest in your mutual fund. Sometimes you're going to buy high. Sometimes you're going to buy low. But as a whole, if I bought and the market's down here and I bought here, I'm going to make money, right? Well, over time, it's going to go up anyway. If I buy when the market's up, well, it could come down a little, but if the market as a whole is still inching up, it's going to do that. So the point is, if you're diversified and you're buying a bunch of funds, you kind of take out that huge gap of high and lows, so to speak. Your fund will come and go, but that's a daily process. Nobody who invests long-term watches the market every day, ever. I check mine once a month, once a quarter, if that. Because if you were to track it every day, you're going to see yourself lose money sometimes. But as you inch down, you'll inch back up, and it's called the ratchet effect. As you keep ratcheting up, now it's going to come up and down. It's going to have low points and high points, but it's always moving. The line is always moving up. That's what you want. Okay, so when you're looking to invest, you'll never. If you've got a lot of cash and you're a big investor, then that's when you would want to use that as your primary objective. So like Donald Trump, he's not sitting around just punching out a couple $100 a month. He's got 10 million staff somewhere for an economic recession, so he can buy low because he's a big investor. I mean, there's guys out there who they do just for the fun of it. They'll go out and just buy when they see things. Day trade. That's what day trading is. You watch stocks go up and down. You buy it when it's low and hope it goes up. And if it does, you sell it before it peaks, so you make a little bit of money. So if you're into day trading or something like that, yes. But for retirement funds, Roth IRAs, long-term mutual fund growth, you're just going to pretty much park it into these mutual funds, and they're going to go up and down, and there's going to be an ebb and flow in it. But as a whole, they will move up. So, but yeah, when you're buying a house, you want to buy low so that you've got equity when you go to sell it. That's anything in investing. Does everybody understand what I'm saying when I'm talking about retirement? There's no way you can catch the market every day and punch in and punch out. That's what the mutual fund manager does. There's a guy, the guy that manages the mutual fund, who's at his computer every day buying and selling the stocks into that fund, hoping he hits low and sells high. Okay, so if he does his job well, the mutual fund will grow in value. It will have bad days, but it will grow in value. So that's why he's a fund manager. He's actually paid to do that, so you don't have to. You park it in the fund. You let him, an expert who knows economics, who knows the markets, who's been doing this for decades, you let him buy and sell the stocks. You don't do that. If I need transmission work done on my car, where would I go? Could I take it to you, Bobby? All right. Could I take it to you, Rocky? All right. Could I do it? Absolutely not. I don't know anything about cars. All right. Where would I take it to? A transmission guy. If you want your investment to do well, where do you think you should take it? To an investment guy. I'm not that guy. I'm not licensed. I don't want the licenses. I almost did, but I got into corporate finance instead of personal. So now I'm a counselor. I don't invest. I've had people say, "Here, let me give you some cash." Like, no, I'm not doing that. My brother tried to do this. Like, let me just give you the money. You do it. I'm like, no, I'm going to teach you how to do this. And then, but I absolutely recommend going to a financial an investor and let him do that. But again, you should never give your money to somebody if you don't know what they're doing. And so this is kind of what this class is all about, is teaching you what they're doing. You don't want to just say, hey, good luck with my money, my life, my family's future. Good luck. I hope you do. I trust you. I just met you yesterday and you seem like a salesman, but good luck. No, you should know exactly what's going on. And Dave Ramsey, this guy, has a website. If you need to find because he's a Christian financial advisor, financial counselor. He uses Christian techniques, a lot of stuff I've shown you. He's very much against debt, which the Bible tells us that the debtor is slave to the lender. All right, it's like having a ball and chain around your foot. You don't have to raise your hand, but I've been in bad debt, and I've been debt-free, and I can tell you, being debt-free is definitely the way to live. You don't owe anybody anything. You don't owe anything on your car. You don't owe anything on credit cards. If you own everything, you don't owe anybody any money. Man, that's freedom. You owe nobody nothing. It's your money. You get to push it where you want. He teaches, and I absolutely teach, to get out of debt. Get out of debt. Stay out of debt. To overcome these financial, you don't have to be an economist to know this. We're going to go through economic turmoil. It's going to come. It's absolutely going to come. I don't know whoever the next president is, if it's the one we have. I think whoever it is fixes things. They think they can fix things, great. But that's not what the indicators are showing. They're absolutely showing financial crisis coming up worldwide because it's a global economy. So what happens in Greece affects us. What happens to us affects Japan, that kind of thing. And to weather the storm, because in our generation, probably going to see $10 a gallon gas prices, because if it's running out and there's only 100 years supply left of it, probably going to see that someday. Maybe not tomorrow, but there's only so much oil in the earth, and it's almost at the halfway used up point. All right, we're about to pass that. Just remember in your mind when we hit 2014 through 2016, and you start seeing some things. We could be completely wrong. I mean, the economists are just predicting. Chinese economy will pass us in 2014 is one of the predictions. Peak oil will happen in 2016. Okay, so mark those 2 years in your mind. It might happen, might not, but they're talking some major events about to unfold. So how do you overcome this? Well, when companies go bankrupt, who's the first one to get paid? Debtors. Anybody who owes anybody money gets paid first, not the stockholders. The people that they owe money to. So the banks get their cut. When they liquidate a company, something goes bankrupt, they sell off the assets, they pay off the debtors first, right? So same thing happens in a nasty economy. You want to be debt-free because they can come after you. I mean, you owe them this money, and you're already hurting to pay your bills, and now the economy's worse, and you're even in a harder predicament. I mean, how are you going to keep paying debtors and survive? You see what I'm saying? You want to be debt-free. My goal, everybody's goal, should be to pay off the car, pay off the credit cards, pay off the student loans, get all that paid off. It's not easy, and that's a whole other class that we need to do. But there actually is a way to do it smart. It's called the snowball effect. But you should think that getting out of debt, absolutely, because this country's in debt. It's in major debt. It can only do that for so long. I mean, I showed you the data. We can only stay afloat for so long. It's so bad. It's so bad. I get into the economic theory behind it, and it would terrify you, but it would take 10 hours to explain, and you'd all be asleep when I'm done. But it's absolutely scary, the stuff that we're talking about that's coming down the road for us if we don't get it cleaned up. And so a large portion of this national debt is consumer debt. I think the average, last time I checked this, the average net worth of an American family was like negative.
Net worth of the
Yeah, of the average American family is a negative net worth. That means they owe more than they own. Sell off your assets, pay off the debtors, they still owe money, that kind of thing. All right? So it is. And this isn't like, oh, we've seen this before, we'll overcome. No, this has never happened before. This has never happened. We've never been in this kind of debt trouble before. So I recommend getting out of debt, which is a biblical principle. Not that it's sinful, it's just not healthy. It's not a healthy living. And then investing for the future and doing these smart things. And we can go into detail later if you've got questions. I'm hoping this isn't the only time we'll do this because there's so many avenues. We haven't even talked about insurance. We haven't even talked about purchasing. Purchasing is a big way to get that $400 a month that you can invest, and I can prove it to you. People say I dress really nice and I have nice stuff. I will tell you, I do not, nor have I ever paid full retail price for anything I own in the past 5 years. Ever. Never. Clearance rack, clearance rack, clearance rack. Some of the stuff, Gabe's. I'm not kidding. So even purchasing can be done well. And you can still look nice and have nice things. My car, I drive a Cadillac CTS. I bought it at 29 years old. Cadillac CTS, oh my gosh. Never thought I'd own one. I paid $4,000 for it. $4,000 for that car. Now I know, you guys look at me like I'm crazy. I don't pay retail. I will not buy a brand new car. That's a bad idea. Bad idea. And I'm sorry for those who just bought Volvos. I'm just saying. I could take you. I wish we had more. I don't want to go too late. It's already getting late.
We need to wrap it up.
But I could show you with my financial calculator how buying a brand new car is a horrible idea. Horrible idea. And, you know, these gimmicks, I mean, we should do more classes.
Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, remember the 0% interest on buying a new car? They're going to give me free money. It's absolutely a marketing technique. It is not accurate. And everyone in here, including myself, believed it at one point. Absolutely. When the auto industry was getting hit in 2008 because consumer spending was down because of the economic recession, nobody was buying brand new cars. Guess what they came out? The 0% financing deal. Sounds like a great idea. It's not. You're actually paying more for the car in a lot of instances if you take the interest. No, it's crazy. These are marketing techniques that work on every one of us that sound good but absolutely don't work. I was with a banker and he told me, he showed this guy, if you would just take the 3% interest, you'd save money than the 0% interest. You'd save like $4,000 in the car. The 0% on anything, furniture, clothing, credit cards, cars is a scam. I hate saying a scam. It's a marketing technique, but it is a scam because banks lend money to people. How do they make money? They lending it, all right? So they're going to lend the money to the car company who's going to then just give it to you for free. How are they going to make money? If they're borrowing the money, bank's not eating the interest. They're not eating the interest. I wonder who's eating the interest. Must be built in the price of the vehicle somehow, and it absolutely is. My friend Aaron Underwood is a finance manager down in Tates Valley. I brought this to him like, this sounds crazy, but let me show it to you. He starts smiling. I get people all the time with that one. It's absolutely a marketing technique. It is not free money. There's no such thing as free money. It just doesn't work. But anyway, I hope this was informative. I hope it scared you a little bit into action. Bobby, you got a great future to look forward to. But honestly, just wrapping it up, good Christian principles do work being diligent, slow, not overnight, get rich quick stuff, diligent investment. And I'm not saying go out in your professional investing now, but hopefully this interests you. Poke some, searching, research, go check this stuff out, look up mutual funds. Yeah, like I said, there's so many classes I could give. The purchasing one is a great one. Shows you how to save a lot of cash on purchasing items so you can invest and that kind of thing. But if you ever have any questions, I'm always available. Everything I do is confidential, and I'd be glad to help you out. But yeah, hopefully we'll get to do it again. Any questions? Are you okay? Did I scare you? No? Yeah.
See you later.
Oh, me? I don't know if you're talking to me or her, or she's sitting right in front of me.
Well, both of you are going.
Say bye.
Well,
Say bye real quick.
Bye.